Expand your mind and enrich your world. It's time for another outstanding podcast from ICRT.
Hey podcast listeners, Keith here. Today we're bringing you another live on-air interview that broadcast Wednesday, September 30th during the morning show with Terry Engel. We're going to be talking to British Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Stephen Parker about what it takes to make it past that intimidating interview process and land your dream job in Taiwan. And luckily, Steve has a pretty decent sense of humor, so the conversation is more fun than I'm making it sound right now. Here's Steve Parker on the morning show with Terry Engel.
George Harrison there, got my mind set on you. 10:09. Time for us to get into the morning show extended interview for this week. And in part, we bring in Keith. Keith, what do we got going on this week?
Well, this morning we are talking to Mr. Stephen Parker. He is the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce in Taipei. He also formerly directed the Community Services Center and has led a number of international corporate projects in Taiwan and elsewhere. So we're talking about Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. So he's had just about every job under the sun in every country under the sun. So he is the perfect guy to lead this conversation, kind of give a focal point to this conversation, to how do you go about getting hooked into this international corporate job world? What's the best way to broach it? And also, I saw something in your resume, in your bio, that I just want to confirm with you real quick. Is it or is it not true that you were voted the sexiest man alive in a People poll in 1987?
I got to correct you, Keith. It was actually 1986.
1986?
Yeah, sometimes they get that wrong on Wikipedia.
Good. Glad I got that cleared up.
First lesson, things not to put on your resume, I think, or things to include on your resume. Is that what that is?
You know, it's a little known fact. Well, it's not little known, but everybody who actually employs people knows that you might get 40, 50, 60, 70 resumes for a single job. Mm-hmm. And, you look at them and there's literally only 3 that could do the job. So what I never understood about this is that why people, and I don't want to be brutal here, I just want to be kind of honest about this, is I'm not sure why some people apply for the jobs they apply for. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think one of the first things if you're going to do a job is have a good look at yourself, have a good look at the job, look at the criteria, and then, try to match them up.
Right. So when you, on your resume, when it says the sexiest man alive, that pretty much qualifies you for any job.
Basically, I can go to Hollywood, I could take up modeling, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Steve,
you're moving on very quickly, I notice.
No, this is the interview.
It is radio, right, so we can get away with that.
Let's just kind of begin the discussion here. What kind of opportunities are available in the international community, and kind of answer that in part A and part B, meaning A, here in Taiwan, what jobs are available, what types of opportunities are available with multinational companies, and think about abroad, think about overseas, what types of and what trends are there in terms of multinational companies? What jobs are they looking for? Obviously, there's things like an insurgence of social media, people that they need and things like that. What are some of the trends?
For me, I really think one of the biggest trends at the moment is people who are multi-skilled. I mean, as an employer myself, I'm looking for people who can come into a place and, all right, maybe they're job salesmen, but I think companies now actually want people who can do a whole bunch of stuff outside of just purely the job function or job role. They want somebody who can actually contribute to the company in many different ways. Yeah. And I recently, obviously I've worked in NGOs quite a bit, and recently I've been dealing with social enterprise. And this, I think, is a future trend in Taiwan. It's where you're running businesses, doing things, but you have a social purpose behind them. And I don't want to derail the conversation and take it all off into an NGO area here. But this is a growth area for Taiwan because the government's behind it. We have some unemployment issues here. But generally around the world, this is the biggest growing sector of industry. And what that requires is it requires people who are multi-skilled. You've got to be able to do a little bit of social media, a little bit of sales, a little bit of fundraising, a little bit of negotiation, all this kind of stuff. So I think companies as a whole are looking for people who are multi-skilled with a lot of experience. And even doing that, I think, gives you a lot of opportunities in the big international companies, even if you've done something small. But if you've done a lot of different things inside that company, no matter what the company was, no matter what they were selling, no matter what they were doing. I think that bodes well for your chances in any company, whether it be international or local.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hear when you say that, what I hear is kind of the really deep understandings that you get from a college degree, like an engineering certificate, something like that. I mean, those things matter, but it almost matters more to just bump around and take as many opportunities within the job that you have. Because Twitter skills, I mean, that doesn't take a degree to pick up. A lot of these marketing skills, it just takes common sense and doing it a couple times.
Exactly. And if I can just add to what Keith is saying here, which is that there is so much focus on education, especially here in Taiwan. Is that what, the companies that are here in Taiwan are looking for? Are people with sort of undocumented Twitter skills, which is kind of what you're alluding to anyway.
Sounds like those skills are jumping the border.
Yeah.
I would just like to say to all the parents out there that I am not saying that you shouldn't go to school.
Right.
I am not saying that you shouldn't go to university. I mean, I worked for the University of Cambridge for 8 years. I believe in education. I think education is very, very, very important. And as an employer, I would look for a good, solid education. What I would say is that when I'm looking at people for a job, I don't look at whether they were the top of their class back in 1994. What I'm looking at, okay, you got a degree, great. What have you done since then?
Right. What have you done with it? Yeah.
Exactly. And if someone can demonstrate to me that they've got some great skills along a range of different things, I'm going to be excited by that. If they've, maybe when they're at school, they were also the head of whatever society, or they were in whatever team it was. They played sport, or they worked part-time at any number of organizations. And I'm not going to mention specific names on air unless they pay me. But if you've done some part-time work somewhere, or you've worked in a restaurant, you've done some other things, join clubs, all this kind of stuff, I think that's really more important than anything else.
In your experience here in Taiwan, is there enough focus for Taiwanese people looking for jobs abroad or with multinational companies? Is there enough focus on extracurricular activities, or is it sort of, we always have this sort of stereotype or generalizing that Taiwanese just focus on their academic credentials? What have you seen?
I mean, I don't want to, you got to be very careful when you talk about some of these things. It can be quite culturally specific. Education is important, and I've said that.
Yeah,
I want that out there.
Right.
I've said education is very important. Having said that, I always look for, and I think everybody I've ever known who is trying to employ somebody always looks for the stuff beyond that.
Yeah,
I have, any number of, in the companies that I've worked for before, and in Taiwan generally, I've been in a lucky position to be the employer more than I've been the employed. And, basically, in many companies I've worked for, everyone's had a master's degree. Absolutely everyone, from the personal assistant all the way through to the manager of whatever department. So what separates them after that?
Right.
You got to have the basic stuff. Great. Get the education. Learn something. But I really think you got to get to that point where someone wants to employ you, I think you need to have more than just the education.
Now, these things that you're talking about, you're mostly talking about companies that are not locally based in Taiwan. Would there be any difference between these values for an international company as opposed to maybe some of these more local companies that Taiwanese people are more familiar with?
It's interesting you bring that up, because I think if you're looking at work for local Taiwanese companies, it's almost that the opposite is true in some ways. If you're an international in Taiwan and you're looking for work in a Taiwanese company, you got to make sure you've got a good education. Literally by law. For many jobs you have to have at least an undergraduate degree. You have to have these things. And I've worked for Taiwanese companies. I've worked for international companies. The Taiwanese companies that I worked for are most impressed by things like having worked for the University of Cambridge. What they don't realize is I didn't actually get a degree from the University of Cambridge.
Just that word Cambridge on the degree helps a lot.
Exactly. But, they're looking, okay, you've got a degree, you've got this, and then they're looking at experience. Whereas I think for international companies, they kind of they assume that you're decently educated, and then they're looking for what you've done. And I think that's if we're talking the difference between international companies and maybe local companies and how they look at hiring people. If you look at local companies, I think they hire consultants generally from universities who are professors, or, they really respect the degree. They respect and that's to be respected. It's a lot of work to get there.
Let me ask then, and maybe we're splitting hairs here on all of this, but now...
Is that a hair joke? Because those who know me know I don't have much of it.
He's kind of lording that big luscious locks over you
that's
right
why
now.
I'm shaking my head.
I heard him the other day telling me how his hair used to be down to his ankles or something.
Yeah, well, it's not that far right now anyway. Yeah. And again, splitting atoms, maybe. But what about multinational companies in Taiwan? Do they sort of intrinsically hold the values you're talking about a local Taiwanese company, or do they adopt the sort of international focus that their international counterparts would have, or their parent companies might have?
That's an interesting question, actually. It's
Thank
a really
you.
good question. Next. No. I think with the international companies, I think in any country, in any place, have what I like to call kind of protocol shift. You know, there's a change. You have to adapt certain kind of local cultures because basically you're 95% of your employees are local. You're working locally, but you have international procedures. So, I mean, if you're going to be employed by and if we're getting to the advice for local Taiwanese looking for work in international companies, you've got to be prepared for the fact that there may be 2 or 3 or 4 interviews to get that job that you really want.
Right.
You got to be prepared for the fact that they might have 4 people in an interview room waiting for you.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be prepared for the fact that they might give you a test.
Well, this is interesting to bring this up because I'm willing to bet that this has probably intimidated a lot of people. I would guess here in Taiwan, where they're maybe not used to that. They're maybe more used to something a little more informal in terms of interviews. I mean, I don't know. I'm pulling something out of the air here, but maybe they're used to informal interviews or interviews with sort of somebody they know because of, some sort of connection to the company or something like that. But yeah, you're right. Sitting in front of a committee of people having an interview is an entirely different thing.
Absolutely, 100% different. And that's kind of where we get into this experience of dealing with people. You know, this sort of committees and joining things and being involved in stuff. So that you're used to it. You're ready for, being in a room with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You know, attending a reception of some kind or, I've even seen international companies where the first thing they do is they take someone out for lunch with the team. But then the interview starts.
Yeah, just to see how the social interaction.
That'll put you at ease.
Yeah, really comfortable.
All right, well, listen, guys, we got to take a break if we can. We'll be back in a moment. We're speaking with Steve Parker. He's the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce. We're talking about working internationally, working for multinational companies and the like. Stay with us. It's The Morning Show with Terry on ICRT.
I listen to it with my friends, my coworkers, everywhere, all the time.
ICRT.
They play a little bit of everything.
Where you'll hear all your favorites.
They play all the music I like. Everything.
All right, so coming into the second half, we are continuing our conversation with Stephen Parker. Once again, he is the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce in Taipei. And as somebody who has been on both sides of the interview desk, he's dropping some pearls of wisdom this morning. Also teaching us how to pronounce wisdom.
Just coming back from what we were talking about there, we kind of just ended there talking about how to maybe prepare for, maybe somebody who is a Taiwanese to prepare for an interview or things to think about when approaching a multinational company. So let's just kind of continue with that. Some things, other things that maybe they might want to think about. Maybe you've got a couple of stories as far as things people need to think about when they go for an interview.
I mean, there's a lot of things you got to think about during an interview for sure. But I mean, what really kind of comes to mind is some of the horror cases.
Okay.
If that's,
Yeah.
Can we share?
Please do. Please do.
This is a safe space. This is a safe space.
Nobody's listening.
There's someone very close to me said, before I come on today, don't talk about anything controversial, Steve, because you're going to upset somebody. You
Perfect.
always upset somebody.
I do it every morning. Don't worry about
That's
it.
your job. My job is to be nice. But for me, there's some basic kind of stuff. And I remember one particular interview who came in, and I work for the British Chamber of Commerce, right? Obviously, Britain is, my accent is slightly Australian, but I have a British passport. Britain is important to me. I think it's a great place. And I work for the British Chamber of Commerce. So,
of course,
my job is to promote Britain. And interviewee, came in for the interview. And as we did, had a bunch of questions that we asked about certain things. And one of the questions I like to ask is, so when I talk about Britain to you, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And the person responded to me, I went to London once. So boring.
You mean kind of like it would also not be good if you went something like I did this morning. Football is so boring. It's just like the worst sport ever.
By the way, we're 0-0.
Yeah.
We're still 0-0. It's going to be 0-0 by the end. But it was a great game. I love football, by the way. I do. I love football. Soccer, as you
You're
guys
required by your job to say so, I know.
But just come back to that interviewee, though. This person couldn't understand why I literally said to them, the interview's over. I just said, the interview's over. You can go now. And what do you mean? You haven't been through my resume yet? I said, I don't need to. I said, you failed.
Yeah.
And it took exactly like that. There was dead silence. So, that to me, that's just think about what you're going for. Think about the job you're going. I remember as a kid, I went for a job can I say gay on the radio? I went for a job on the radio. I went for a job in a well-known gay pub where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I walked in and I said, do you have any work going? I'm looking for work in pubs. And they said, do you have a specific interest in working in this place? Obviously asking me if I was open to working in a gay pub. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I'm just looking for work anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And the guy said, you can leave now.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be interested or involved in the organisation, that you're going for.
The difference between just wanting a job and wanting to get involved,
right,
as a career, or not even necessarily a career, but just getting involved in what you're going to be spending a lot of time doing.
Well, exactly. And at least, I always figure in an interview that's the best you're ever going to be. If someone in an interview comes off at all badly, that's a big red flag for me. I'm immediately like, wasn't comfortable with that person.
Yeah, I guess the idea is in an interview, you're bringing your top stuff. So if your top stuff is not impressing somebody, or you're not showing any enthusiasm at that point, you're certainly not going to after.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So if you're gonna work at like Hershey's, how would somebody need to demonstrate an interest in Hershey's? Do they need to say that they love those candy bars?
Again, I think there's two things on this. One, you either say you've loved Hershey's since you were a kid and it's the best thing ever, or you say, chocolate's not my thing, but here's how I could sell it, or here's what I could do, or here's what I believe that I could do. You don't have to lie. Don't lie to me. I'm not going to, I don't want, there's a lot of different companies, a lot of different things. You can't love everything.
Yeah.
But if you're going to work for somebody, be honest about the reasons you want to work for that company.
Let's go to the interview you're talking about then. And this guy or gal that, sort of said London was boring. And
should I give you the name and the phone number?
No. But what I am saying is, how could they have framed that to you that would have changed? Because you're right. You don't want anybody to lie. You don't want them to walk in and go, I love London so much. What'd you love about it? Well,
fingers and mash.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So how
that is good, though.
How could they have framed that would have kind of impressed you?
I would have kind of come into it maybe with my first impression of London wasn't that good. But since I've been researching for this position,
right,
I've realized that it's more than just my experience that I had the first time out. The first time I went to London, I didn't like it. Then I went back again 3 years later, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Now, what would have changed? Well, stuff had changed. Who knows? But the point is that sometimes your first impressions can be wrong.
Right.
This person should have come at that. If they were going to be honest at all about this, one, don't tell me. just don't tell me you hated it. Or two, if you say, well, my first impression wasn't that great, but, I've been doing some research and now I'm really finding things and I'm looking forward to learning more about it and, just kind of come out and be positive about it.
Right. Let me just jump in again with another interview type of question that we hear all the time. And do we actually hear this all the time, or is it a bit of a fallacy? And B part, maybe, how do we answer it? This question about, what are your weaknesses, your strengths and weaknesses? How am I supposed to answer this?
I once was asked, this is a question that probably made me not get the thing, is I was asked, what would your best friend say about you, and what would your worst enemy say about you?
Yeah.
And I was like 19 at the time. I didn't have any enemies. Like, who has an enemy when you're 19?
You do, Keith.
And I'll add,
trust me, you do.
The worst question I ever got asked in an interview was, if you were a fruit, which fruit would you be? I stood up and walked out, and I go, I don't think I need this job. You know what I mean? I mean, I did want the job, but I'm not going to answer a question like that. That's ridiculous. But
this brings a very quick point, though, because what you just brought up actually is, I think, a very good piece of advice, because most people going for an interview think they are being interviewed. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's two people interviewing each other.
Right.
You know, you're deciding whether you want to work for the person or people across the table from you.
Right.
That's how I treat every interview. I treat it like a conversation, like I'm just meeting somebody.
Right.
If you walk in feeling like this person, they hold my life in their hands, you're I was going to say a word that I'm not allowed to say on radio.
Yeah.
You just can't do that.
That's probably the best advice you could give for an interview is exactly that. Just thinking about it, which is, if you go into it intimidated, right. You're going to be intimidated, and no matter what the question is, it's going to be intimidating.
Right. Do I want to work for this person?
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, not every manager, not every person who's going to employ is going to be the best employer for you.
Can we just get just a very quick shot of advice here? Just because I
thought I was just giving you advice.
No. I mean, what I mean is in this next little bit of advice, let's not harp on it too long. Just give us a quick little shot. Because I've been in a position where I've had to get resumes from people as well here in Taiwan. And I got to tell you that the resume skills here in Taiwan are really terrible.
I just helped a buddy write one, actually.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now, that the way they approach their resume is wrong. Is there anything that you can for a multinational company, maybe for Taiwanese or Taiwanese companies, local companies, or for a coffee shop or something? Maybe it's something different. But here today, we're talking about working for a multinational company. A quick couple shots of advice.
Yeah, don't write something that says I come from a simple family in Taichung.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. You get a lot of that. It's almost like an autobiography.
I hate. The secret to me, and I tell the people when they're writing emails or following up things as well, with people. Basically now, I get like 400 emails a day. How do you sort through that stuff? Just give me think about it on a smartphone, and what could fit on the smartphone. That's all you got time for. Mm. Someone's going to read that bit.
Yeah, right.
And your CV, I tell everybody, I said, even if all the stuff at the back, you fill in some details, first page, just say, 10 years of this, 3 years of this, 2 years of that, my education, this.
Bullet point it right at the beginning.
Right in the front. Because, as I said to you before, I'm getting maybe 60, 70 CVs for a job. And, you got to sort through them. You look at the front page and go, and then it kind of like goes in the rubbish bin, or it goes in the,
Yeah, right.
So, short and sweet, and you can put some stuff at the back. You can fill it in if you want to, but multinational companies don't care whether you come from a nice family in Taichung with 4 brothers and 2 sisters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen those CVs, and I blame English teachers in the 80s or something, because somebody taught people how to write CVs way back when, and I don't think those people had ever had jobs before.
What if they try to spin it, though? Like, I was helping a friend just this week write his CV, and he actually had
you made this up, didn't you, Keith? You wrote 4...
I tried to help him with that. No, here's how I tried to help him. So he wrote this thing about how he's been working in his parents' shop this whole time. I tried to spin it as I have faced these difficult workplace situations since a young age, and I've learned to cope with them, and here's what I've gotten from that experience. Is that enough, or should you just not touch on it at all?
See, to me, I think that's, if you get to the interview, that's what you talk about in an interview.
Yeah.
That's when you kind of have a chance to show personality and show what you've done. A CV, someone just wants to see, here's the I said at the beginning, I think I remember, look at the job, look at what you can do, and then match them up.
Right.
Even if it's like, I would be really impressed with someone who said, well, you're looking for strategic management skills. I play online games. And here's, it's connected to that because I have to manage 14 different tribes, or whatever. But just match what you've done to
whatever it is to the job requirements.
Show that you've at least read the advert or the job requirement or the job description.
Right. If we can switch gears totally here, because this is something
we're back on soccer now.
And how boring it is.
I love soccer officially.
Part of what we wanted to talk about here today was not just how Taiwanese can get involved in a multinational company here in Taiwan or abroad, but also that there is a fairly large expat community that lives here, and a lot of people And a lot of expats that come here get introduced either through traveling or maybe through work and travel at a young age, just after university or something like that. And they come here to Taiwan and they realize, geez, I love this place. I really love this place. And I've come here to either teach English or work, maybe as a sales rep for Asia or something like that. And they get here, they love the place, and they go, geez, I want to stay here. But you know what? I have a degree in whatever
thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics or whatever,
English.
And I'm teaching English. How can I, move on from that? Are there other jobs available to me? How do I go about finding where those jobs are? What companies need people? How do I meet those people? What skills do I need to add to my repertoire? How can an expat that has decided to put his roots here in Taiwan kind of move past the stereotypical job that an expat has?
That's a very big question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The book will be coming out in 3 weeks. So anybody who'd like, no, the ebook actually.
It'll have a preface from Terry.
Yes, the preface from Terry. This has got to be broken down in a few different parts, I think, because initially you've got, if you're going to live in a country, forget about being in Taiwan or forget about being anywhere. If you want to live and prosper in a country, my biggest advice, it sounds obvious, but, you got to learn how to speak local language, right? If you're working in an office, I get it. If you're here for 2 or 3 years and you're the CEO of a company, fine. People have to match you. The company speaks English or whatever. But if you're going to be local and get local jobs or work in local companies, you've got to be able to speak Chinese, at least Mandarin, the very least. That's my first bit. The second thing is if you want to get jobs locally here, you've got to network locally. And I know that sounds kind of obvious, but, I think for some of the international community, it becomes easy. Taiwan's an easy place to live. There are places where, the international crowd kind of hangs out. You've got your international friends. You share a language. You share some culture. It's great. But if you want to get into the local companies and stuff like that, I think Taiwanese, like most people, but maybe even more, I think Taiwanese value this sense of you belonging to Taiwan. Now, if you have a local partner, okay, that's one thing in your favor. If you speak local language, that's another thing in your favor. But if you've been to places around Taiwan that they understand and can share, if they've met you at things like, a local Rotary Club or a local Chamber of Commerce or something, and we know they're not always the most fun things to do, not every time, but you got to get involved with the local community in some way.
Right.
How are you going to meet people? I worked for a local company here for a while, and the reason I got that job is because about 12 years ago, I offered a place at my table to the guy who eventually became my boss.
Right.
I saw him walking around, and I said, "Hey, we got a couple of spare spots. Why don't you sit here?" And I didn't know he had owned half of Taiwan or whatever it is, but
Yeah.
And so I think you just got to be, you got to put yourself out there, and you got to be local. You can't be local because you're not, but you got to enjoy being part of the community.
Saying to put yourself out there is pretty, is obvious advice sort of, and a little vague. If we could maybe
I've never been accused of being vague before.
If we can maybe just even narrow it down there to, and you'd be the guy to really kind of talk towards these things, some real specifics as to what people can do and where they can get involved. I know you mentioned chambers of commerce and Rotary clubs or things like this. Are there any things like this? Is it worth spending time on the internet? Is it worth, or are there websites to go to? Or like, you probably know more about specifics than that. Should I take up golf? Should I just give us a few specifics for the expats that may be listening and are thinking, geez, yeah, of course I want to put myself out there, but I don't even know sort of what that means in Taiwan.
Sure. For me, really what it involved was getting involved in things. Now, the specifics I think can be a little bit different, but for me, I love golf. I play golf. So I join some golf societies. I don't just play with the international groups. I've joined some local groups,
Right.
if you love badminton, if you love football, if you love whatever it is, then try and join local clubs. If you like bike riding, there are lots of local bike riding clubs where people, they go up Yangmingshan or they do whatever,
Yeah.
So join. And, okay, if you struggle a little bit with the language, fine. Taiwanese are really nice. They'll kind of...
If I can throw in just a quick anecdote for myself, when I lived in Kaohsiung as well, being a musician, the first thing I did was join a band, with all Taiwanese guys in it. You know what I mean? And my sort of friendship circle grew from that. So if I can throw in my own...
Did that grow into the radio job?
No, it didn't.
But it did prove that he's cooler than I am because I played golf.
Excellent. Well, guys, let's hold on right there. We got to take ourselves another break here. We're talking to Steve Parker, Executive Director of the BCCT, the British Chamber of Commerce, here in Taipei or Taiwan? It's Taipei. Yeah, right. Okay. We'll be back in just a moment, right after a short break. It's the Morning Show with Terry on ICRT.
We're ICRT. World-class radio in Taiwan.
10:44 in the morning, we return here, and just to kind of put all of what we've been talking about into practice a little bit with Steve and the help of Keith here, what we're going to do and what we've set up here is a little bit of a mock interview for those who are listening. Now, this could be useful for somebody who's Taiwanese who's looking for work with a multinational company. This could also be for use with an expat, which Keith is going to be playing the part of. He's pretty good at it, playing an expat here. Interviewing with a multinational company, and we're going to kind of put this into a practice here and a little practicum, if you will. Keith is going to be playing the part of...
my former English teacher self.
His former English teacher self, and Steve will be playing the part of...
Of an international Laoban.
Of an international Laoban. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of 3, 2, 1 action it, and here we go, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of what we've been talking about in practice in a job interview. Action.
Okay, Keith, is it?
Yep, yeah.
Welcome. Glad you could come. Maybe if we could just start the interview off with you, basically giving, in your own words, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Alrighty, well, I think a lot of people would say that I'm an English teacher, but honestly, I would prefer to describe myself as an educator who focuses primarily on business English. I work a lot with young entrepreneurs, mostly between the 10 and 11-year-old range. But really, when I came to Taiwan, it was to pursue...
So, Keith, if I could just interrupt for a moment.
Yeah.
Basically, for the international sales rep position that we're looking for, how do you feel that your experience connects directly to that?
Right. International sales. Well, I do work very well with other people. I have a strong delegation ability, I would say, and I demonstrated that in this job when I worked with my colleague, the teacher assistant. I would say that 95% of my work I delegated to them. They handled almost everything in the classroom, for the kids crying, the kids yelling, the discipline, the food. Sure. I delegated it all.
And what did you do?
The education was mostly my response. I spoke English. I spoke English. I spoke a lot of English.
As an international sales rep, English will be part of your job requirement.
Oh, good.
Which is good. You have ticked one box there. But if you talk about successes that you've had in your work experience, Keith?
Well, I have certainly shown the ability to work cool under pressure. In a lot of instances, I would point to one time in particular where the inspectors came to my class, and this was not only a cool under pressure kind of situation, it was a problem-solving situation, because usually I jump out the window in those situations, but in this particular time, the window was blocked, and so instead I jumped into the closet, and so I just like that, I figured it out, and the inspector never found me.
Yeah, this is probably the point where I would be saying it's been really nice and
exactly. Now, what we're kind of illustrating here is maybe
the what not to do,
not how to approach an interview. Of course,
I've got a really quick one on this because I remember years ago when I was about 20 and I was going for a job in a library, and it was basically kids storytelling. Mm-hmm. And they said to me, I was working at the time, I was working at 7-Eleven, overnight, and I wanted a better job during the day. And they said to me, so what's the most difficult thing you've ever had to deal with? And I said, well, I had to stop a knife fight. And they looked at me and said, the interview is over.
But now is that not a skill that people would want? That shows great kind of diplomatic...
I felt if the kids had got into a knife fight at storytelling,
You're the guy.
I could have stopped them.
You're the guy.
Excellent. Well, listen, Steve, we have kind of run out of time. This is a great topic that we could probably spend a lot more talking on. I'm quite sure that there's a lot of material that can be taken away from today's talk. Maybe we can come back and kind of extrapolate on that and talk about a sort of part B of this in the future, meaning actually working with multinational companies, not just trying to find jobs in that. So maybe that can be part B in the future. But thanks so much for taking the time.
Only if we made it past the interview and you want to continue this relationship.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I feel like now we're being judged. And,
well, I do have 75 other radio stations to interview.
Excellent. Well, listen, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Terry.
Here.
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, no problem. And we'll return next week. Most Wednesdays we're doing this, Keith. Extended interviews just for people who have just kind of tuned in. Tell them a little bit about what these extended interviews are, just to recap all this.
Well, we find some neat people in the community that have some cool stuff going on, and we bring them on the air, and we just chat with them a bit. It's not too structured. It's not too formal. We just want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Steve. We'll continue. I'll be back with your themed request theme in just a few minutes. This is Hot Chocolate. In the meantime, everyone's a winner, baby. Here on ICRT FM 100.
All right, sorry to cut off Hot Chocolate there, but that was all the interview we have for today. But we'll be bringing you more of these live on-air bits just about every week. You can hear them live Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m., or catch them on Taiwan Talk's podcast stream. And if you're listening through iTunes, please do take a sec to rate and review the show. Really does help us get the word out there. And that's it for today for Taiwan Talk and the Morning Show with Terry Engel. I'm Keith Manconi. Thanks for listening.